Moving to a new house always brings the hassle of moving furniture, but it has the purpose of bringing the inner peace we long for in a new home. But we don't always know who lived here before us, or still lives here. That's what Millie discovered, in an unforgettable way. Millie Becker moved to the house on 3rd Avenue in Iron Hill, a forgotten town in rural Pennsylvania, among hills covered with dense forests and slow rivers spreading over humid valleys. It was late September. The air already carried the smell of dry leaves, and the sky remained overcast with gray clouds. According to records, the house had been built in 1937 and stood with few changes since then. Wood structure, slanted roof, tall windows with iron frames, and a wide porch with rusty railings. The price was ridiculously low. The broker justified it with evasions: undervalued region, pending renovations, confusing history. Millie, newly divorced and trying to start over far from the city, didn't ask much. She just wanted peace. She moved her things in a small moving truck, and during the first nights barely left the kitchen. She felt the house smelled of dust and old fabric. But what bothered her most was the silence. The town was too small to have noise. The only sound left was her own breathing. The first week, everything went normally. She painted part of the living room wall, cleaned cabinets, arranged the bedrooms. She slept poorly, but attributed it to the move. On the quieter early mornings, however, something began to emerge: subtle creaking noises of wood under her feet. Not like when the house settles in the cold, but repetitive in sequence, like footsteps that always stopped just before reaching under her bed. On the 3rd night in a row hearing this, she knelt in the hallway, pressing her ear to the floorboards. Nothing, just silence. It was then she noticed one of the ventilation grates near the bedroom wall. It was a rusted iron structure with thin wires between old crossbars. And there, between 2 bent bars, a pair of eyes. They didn't move. They didn't blink. They just watched. Millie fell backward, crawling until she hit the opposite wall. When she looked back, the eyes were gone. And in that instant, she knew it wasn't just the house that kept stories. Something inside was still alive. The next morning, Millie called the broker. She asked if there were renovation records for the house, especially something related to the ventilation system. He evaded, spoke of outdated documents, and suggested she check the town registry office. The conversation ended quickly, as if he wanted to shut it down before anything was said. She drove to downtown Iron Hill. The registry was a low, gray building smelling of old paper and damp carpets. The clerk, a woman named Diane, initially hesitated when she heard the address. Then she handed over a dusty folder and said, "Look it up on your own. I'm not paid to remember dead people." Millie found a series of records starting in 1937. The house had belonged to Donald and Elise Gardner, a couple without criminal history until 1962, when police were called to the scene after reports of screams and nocturnal movement. The arrest record indicated Elise was found injured and 3 young girls in the basement, kept there with no documents, no formal education. The report showed signs of physical abuse, but no photos were attached. Donald was arrested for assault and neglect. 2 years later, Elise was found dead, and Donald declared missing. Further down, a 1974 addendum stated that the property was officially released after case closure and cataloging of remaining items. No mention of the girls. No explanation of what happened to the basement. Millie returned home in silence. She hadn't shared what she saw the night before with anyone. But now that pair of eyes took on new meaning. Someone or something could still be there. At dusk, she decided to check the basement hatch. It was in the back of the kitchen, covered by a worn rug. The hinges were rusty, but the latch was surprisingly new. When she managed to open it, a wooden staircase led down to a narrow, dark space. She descended holding her phone, using its flashlight. In one corner was a small wooden structure with grates, an improvised enclosure. Inside, old dolls torn. In another spot, marks scratched on the wall, as if someone had been counting days. Dozens, maybe hundreds. It was then she heard the first sound. A dry crack, coming from the floor above. Someone was walking. In the living room, where she'd been just minutes before. Millie switched off the flashlight and climbed cautiously. The late afternoon light filtered through the heavy curtains, casting an ochre tint around the house. The room was empty, but the hallway rug was slightly out of place. The same one covering a second grate near the stairs. As she approached, she noticed marks around the iron grate, like small hands had been pushing the boards at the corners. Some were loose. She picked up a screwdriver and began removing nails. The wood gave way easily. Beneath the floor, there was no plumbing or pipes, only a narrow, dark space where a person could lie down. The air inside was colder, but dense. When she shone the flashlight down, she saw the eyes again. This time they were closer. A thin gray face with sparse hair and uneven skin. No longer a child. The eyes didn't blink. They just watched. Millie fell backward, hitting her shoulder on the wall. She stood, then reflexively covered the grate with the rug. She locked all the doors and ran to the car, but its battery didn't respond. She tried calling anyone, but the phone read, "No service." It was as if the house had erased everything around it. No connection. No escape. That night, she didn't turn on any lights. She stayed in darkness with the shotgun the house's previous owner had left in the laundry closet. Every creak of the house, every wood crack settling in the cold, sounded intentional. During the night, the sounds came back, but they weren't the same. Not footsteps. Not scratching. Now there were breaths. Multiple. Alternating. As if many mouths were breathing under the floor at once, out of sync yet present. Millie covered her ears, but the breaths seemed to come through the walls, vibrating through the floor. At dawn, she found nothing out of place except the basement hatch latch, now broken. The iron rod that had once been secure was split in two, as if pried apart by force. The basement remained open, the darkness inside far more intense than normal. A smell of rotten flesh escaped through gaps. She didn't go down. She closed the hatch, dragged a heavy cupboard over it, and stepped away. By late afternoon, the house felt different. The door seams trembled as if someone were breathing on the other side. Picture frames hung crooked on the walls. The dining room mirror, covered since her move-in, now stood uncovered. On it, an opaque blotch had grown darker each time she passed, like moisture, but not. That night, Millie couldn't sleep. She sat in the hallway holding the shotgun, her eyes fixed on the covered grate. The lamp flickered, though the power was stable. The wall clock hands moved at an abnormally slow pace. 1 minute lasted 3, or 5, or perhaps none. Around 3 in the morning, she heard something moving beneath her. Not quickly, a slow drag, like someone crawling under the floorboards, with arms and legs pressed against their body. At some point, the sound stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Then she dozed off. When she opened her eyes, she was still in the hallway. But it wasn't night. It was day. Every door was open, the windows wide. The rug, the one that had covered the grate, had been moved to the backyard, clean and folded. And inside the grate, nothing. Or almost nothing. There was a strand of hair. A long dark lock, just like the hair she found in the bathroom. And a small ripped chunk of old child-sized fabric, worn with age. Something clearly not hers. That day, Millie tried to flee. She ran to the nearest neighbor's house, over half a kilometer away. She pounded on the door, sobbing as she explained everything. The old man who answered just shook his head and said, "That house devours people, but it doesn't end with you. It only begins." She never went back. She left all her belongings inside. By the next morning, the police were notified. The squad car found the front door ajar. Everything seemed normal. No sign of violence. Only her phone lay on the floor, flashlight still on, beam pointed at the hallway grate. Inside it, eyes were watching again. Since then, nobody has moved in. The listing was removed. But locals say that on windless nights, you can hear wood scraping from inside the floorboards. And sometimes, the upstairs light turns on by itself. Even though the house is empty, the floor still creaks. Millie moved to a distant city far away and never had a good night's sleep again. She still dreamed of those eyes behind the grates, until one day they were under her bed watching her. Would you have the courage to live in a house with grates in the floor and a history like that? What if a pair of eyes watched you every night without blinking? Tell us in the comments if you have ever heard noises coming from under your floorboards. Do you know any stories about old houses with suspicious basements? Don't forget to like, share with your friends, and subscribe for more stories like this. Iron Hill still exists, and someone still lives beneath the boards.